Anime in the modern era is just as corporate as it is creative. Any series that you could possibly think of is either a product, selling you a product, or both. You can't really talk about the corporate side of anime without talking about what's called anime licensing. And without getting too much into the weeds of things, anime licensing is essentially just the process in which non-Japanese companies obtain the rights to stream, distribute, and sell anime outside of Japan. Now these days, the rights to just about any anime that drops belong to some company somewhere. Because lo and behold, if there's money to be made, niggas are gonna try to make it. But before anime had grown into the massive multi-billion-dollar industry that it currently exists as today, the licenses around the shows that were produced were a bit more fast and loose, to say the least. A lot of anime never officially got licensed outside of Japan because demand for the product simply wasn't there at the time. Of the select series that did end up copping a license to be distributed outside of Japan, a fair few of them have since had their licenses, I don't want to say abandoned because I'm sure someone somewhere still technically owns the rights to these shows, but let's just say a lot of these shows have faded into obscurity so hard that the official rights owners of these shows can't be bothered to actually enforce any legitimate copyright measures over the shows that they technically own. Because these shows aren't being protected as vigilantly as their modern day counterparts, what you end up with is a whole host of series that can technically be uploaded to YouTube.com with little to no issue. Unedited, uncensored, just the full anime right there on your YouTube home screen. Every now and then, the YouTube black box, aka mommy algorithm, will decide to recommend me one of these uncut, uncensored anime. And the series that we're talking about today, Roujin Z, is one of these so-called YouTube anime that I happened to encounter in the wild a few months back. I find it ironic that YouTube's AI algorithm is responsible for putting me onto this movie, because the movie itself happens to be one of the most unique and compelling takes on AI fiction that I've seen in a minute. And so today, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for me to be the one to put y'all on. The great mother algorithm has brought you here to this YouTube video for one reason or another, and without any further ado, it's time that we explore this zany 1991 film from Studio APPP, Roujin Z. So this particular topic, the topic that Roujin Z explores, the tech stuff, the AI stuff, I've always found that type of stuff really interesting. A lot of y'all probably don't know this because, to be fair, I only really bring up like school stuff on this channel when I need an excuse not to upload, but regardless, I actually spent the past 4 years of my life from August 2020 to May 2024 completing my computer science degree. Now in hindsight, the ironic thing about this computer science degree is that like basically a cool 70% of it was self-taught. Like, yeah, professors gave assignments and lectures and stuff, but I don't know, in the world of coding, you learn a lot more from like practice and just figuring stuff out than you could ever learn from, you know, just having someone tell you what to do. Now all this is fine and good, right? Practice makes perfect, as they say, but the caveat there, at least when it comes to coding, is like, unless you're just a very specific type of person, just like a Mandark from Dexter's Lab type of person, coding for long periods of time, day in and day out, yeah, it's not fun. The biggest hurdle I saw myself and my classmates facing when it came to learning coding, especially in like those first 2 years, was how unbelievably boring it could be sometimes. And so when I first tapped into the sponsor of today's video, 𝙏𝙠, I immediately saw the vision, bro. Like, I was immediately on board with what they were doing. 𝙏𝙠 takes the process of learning how to code and it gamifies it into like this RPG style mission. And so while you're learning back-end development in the Python and Go programming languages, you're also like collecting XP and fighting bosses and doing fun RPG style missions. Like I said before, you can't learn how to code without actually putting in the time and effort into learning how to do so. You can't learn to code without like building your own projects constantly practicing and improving. 𝙏𝙠 helps you get into the mix. It gets you building these IRL projects, but it takes the boredom out of doing so that when you do hit a wall and things get challenging, you still have the incentive to keep going instead of like, you know, turning into me last year, bashing my head into my desk because my code won't run. If you go to 𝙏𝙠 right now and use my code Teddy Slump, you can get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Also, Boot has a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, so really there's no risk in at least just giving it a try. We're already coming up on a new year. You're already chasing new goals because of your New Year's resolution. Why not add learning how to code to that list of resolutions and give 𝙏𝙠 a visit today? Thank you again to 𝙏𝙠 for sponsoring this video. And now, back to the video. Alright, so in the world of Roujin Z, technology has advanced a fair bit quicker than it did in the real world. But instead of being like a full-on cyberpunk futuristic type world, it's more like the IRL 80s if certain aspects of society were just slightly more advanced than they were in the real world. So take healthcare for instance. In Roujin Z, particularly in Japan because anime, but in the world of Roujin Z, healthcare has advanced to the point where at-risk patients have access to what's called the Medical Crisis Network. The Medical Crisis Network is essentially like this countrywide network that handles all of the healthcare within the jurisdiction of Japan. Now, like any system of this scale, having the Medical Crisis Network implemented into everyday life comes with its own sets of benefits and drawbacks. Like sure, it's great that old niggas can have access to nurses whenever the need may arise, but like at the same time, greater access requires greater resources. And so when the movie kicks off, nurses are in such high demand that they literally have young folks getting called off of their day job so that they can handle some of the patient surplus that's plaguing the Medical Crisis Network. One of these sort of half nurses, so to speak, is a young woman named Haruko who works as a nursing student, a volunteer nurse, and a waitress all at once. Haruko is working mid-shift at her restaurant job when she suddenly gets a nursing-related house call on the emergency line. Now come to find out, the house call that Haruko had received was literally just because of some old head that shot himself in bed, which like, yeah, I understand not wanting to have doo-doo booty, so I'll give Pops a pass for that, but like at the same time, come on Pops, stank booty is not a medical crisis, bruh. It's no reason to use the network to call Haruko off work. Now all these problems that I just brought up with the network, this isn't just me yapping my ass off as per usual, okay? These are actual in-universe problems that the powers that be are trying to figure out how to solve. We cut to this confidential meeting where all of these powerful, influential government officials are basically receiving the same debriefing that I just gave y'all, and as this meeting is going on, one of the men in this room stands up, introducing his colleagues to Project Z, a project that he's claiming will be a catch-all cure to the issues that the Crisis Network is currently facing. Now, we don't really know what exactly Project Z refers to yet, apart from it having a mysterious, classified sounding name, but what we do know is that anytime someone is trying to sell you a product with the claim that it will single-handedly solve all of your problems, yeah bro, it's about a 99% chance that you're dealing with a certified scammer. Let's just call it how it is right now, bro. We cut back to Haruko though, and Haruko is busy cleaning up after Pops, cleaning his booty, cleaning his house, just kinda all around looking after him, just making sure that he's good. You see, Haruko is a very sweet woman, okay? She goes above and beyond to be there for Pops. Since he doesn't really have anybody in his life anymore, she's way nicer than me personally, alright? Cause I'm not checking out for grown man boo-boo booty, but as Haruko is tidying up Pops' crib for him, just trying to brighten his day a little bit, two government agents and two medical professionals pull up and basically confiscate Pops with little to no explanation. Haruko is like, hey yo, like who are y'all and where are y'all going with Pops? And the government agent, whose name is 𝙏𝙖 by the way, is like, look kid, old head's family gave us permission to use him for our special little project, and so yeah, get lost. Now at this point Pops is stressed, right? He's like, Haruko, help me, but realistically there's nothing that Haruko can really do to save him against mad government officials, and so she kind of just has to sit there and watch as Pops gets dragged off to Lord knows where. We cut to the next day, and we're currently at a tech demo that's taking place at Haruko's university. The demo is being hosted by the boy 𝙏𝙖, aka the dude who stormed Pops' house the other day, and come to find out, Pops is actually up there on stage with 𝙏𝙖. He's in like this giant hospital bed looking contraption. Now this right here, this is called the 𝙏𝙖𝙡. The 𝙏𝙖𝙡 is basically the flagship product of the Project Z initiative that we were talking about earlier. 𝙏𝙖 starts going on about the bed, basically presenting its features in like this Steve Jobs venture capitalist tech demo sort of style, and I'm not even gonna lie to you right now, bruh. This bed is absolutely fucking OP, bruh. Essentially, the bed is supposed to ease the whole elder care burden that the crisis network is facing by being a one-stop shop for everything that a bedridden elder could possibly need in life. Or, you know, at least what they have left of life. Now, the boy Tarada actually spends like a cool 5 minutes of the movie just going over all the bed's bells and whistles. We don't really have that type of time, and so I'm just gonna speed run through the numerous features of the bed so that y'all can start to get a good idea of just how cracked the Z001 is. The Z001 can bathe your elders. It can pee and poop for your elders. It has a multiple monitor entertainment system for your elders. It has a phone for your elders that can connect to other elders that are also within the Z001 network. It can dress your elders. It can feed your elders, chewing and swallowing for them. It can exercise your elders. It can monitor your elders' vitals. It can diagnose and prescribe medicine for your elders. It can send out emergency calls to the hospital for your elders. The Z001 can do all of this and more thanks to the power of what's called a 6th generation computer. Basically, in the Roujin Z universe, the 6th gen computers are these groundbreaking new computer hardware that can quote unquote learn as they're used more and more. They're basically just anime sci-fi bullshit computers that can do way more than whatever device you're watching this video on right now, despite being built in the 80s. That's right. In the Roujin Z verse, we have super AI CPUs that can think for themselves. But we don't have HD TV. Now, everyone at the demonstration who's watching in the crowd is over here gassing up the Z001, right? Asking questions about it, just trying to figure out more about this bed, when suddenly Haruko bursts in and she's like, yo, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, this bed seems kinda fucked up. Haruko is like, look, y'all, I respect the technology. I think this is all very cool, very innovative, but like, look at Pops. We get a look at Pops and like, yeah, he's not looking good at all. Tarada is like, yo, shut the fuck up. Psych, nah, he doesn't say that. That would be crazy though. But he basically just kind of ignores Haruko and cancels out her criticism by saying some shit to hype up the crowd even more. As the demonstration comes to a close and everyone starts filing out the room, Haruko tries to go after Pops to make sure he's alright and whatnot, but she's unable to get to him before the press does, and so she basically just has to sit there and take her L once again. You know, keep it pushing despite Pops' suffering. We cut to a few hours later and Haruko is pulling up to where her nurse friends are hanging out, just kinda shooting the shit. The woman seems pretty downtrodden since a patient that she cares about is basically being used as an experimental guinea pig, but she doesn't have much time to drag her feet about Pops, because not long after she walks into the room, one of her friends, this redhead chick, comes up and she's like, yo, Haruko, you're getting these weird messages on your computer in the computer room. Haruko and the redhead go to check out the computer room so that Haruko can see what her friend was talking about. And sure enough, when they get to the room, Haruko sees that basically every computer in this room has a console on the screen that just keeps printing out Haruko's name over and over again. Now confused and slightly creeped out by the computers randomly printing her name, Haruko tries to click on the screen to see what's going on, right? To see if she can get to the bottom of this odd occurrence. But immediately upon doing so, all of the computers in the room spark to life and start tweaking out, and now, instead of just printing her name, the computers are printing a message. Help me, Haruko. Now at this point, Haruko already knows what's up, bruh. She immediately gets the sense that this has something to do with the Z001 that they got Pops hooked up in. And so with the help of her other nurse buddies, Haruko devises a plan to sneak into the building where they're hiding the Z001 in an attempt to free Pops. Unfortunately for the gang, this shit ain't no Scooby-Doo, bruh. A government-funded initiative is not about to let a bunch of college kids do them dusty. And so as Haruko is giving her inspirational anime MC speech about how it's their responsibility as nursing volunteers to save Pops, Tarada and the other government official dude whose name is Hasegawa pulls up and they're like, yeah, y'all are going to prison, you know that, right? Haruko decides to tell Tarada about the message that she had received from Pops on the PCs back at the hospital. And Hasegawa, after checking the bed system logs, is actually able to confirm that what Haruko is saying was true. All of a sudden, upon hearing this, Tarada changes his tone, right? He starts thanking Haruko for the info and escorting the gang out the building. But just as they're about to leave, this modulated voice comes from out the bed. It's Pops, begging for Haruko to help him. Upon hearing this voice, Haruko runs up to save Pops, trying to rip the 𝙏𝙖𝙡's hardware out of his body. And Terada, upon seeing Haruko do so, proceeds to smack the dog shit out of her, and he's like, yo, what are y'all doing? Are y'all trying to kill this man? Haruko is like, am I trying to kill him? Bitch, y'all are trying to kill him. And she proceeds to jump Terada with her 2 girlfriends. The dude actually stays out of the way, which I find funny. He said, shit, I'm about to let the ladies handle this one. But as Terada, big grown ass, is busy squabbling with a bunch of young women, Pops' bed suddenly starts to move on its own. Pops' robot voice is like, Haruko, let's go home. And he proceeds to ram through Terada like Marshawn Lynch before leading the way out of the building. And remember the dude friend who didn't want to get his hands dirty during the squabble? Yeah, they end up leaving his ass behind on accident, to be fair, but like, he arguably kinda deserves it, maybe. Now look, I don't know what type of shit they put in this 𝙏𝙏 bed, but both the hardware and the software in this machine have to be absolutely crazy, bro, because Pops is somehow able to remote control the bed, and as he's doing so, he is zooming down the highway at breakneck speeds, bro. Like, he is damn near going automobile speed, if not faster. Haruko and the girls, once again executing a plan that wasn't really thought through all too well, proceed to go back to Pops' home so that they can get him a picture of his wife. But of course, this is dumb as shit, because where do you think the first place the cops are going to try to look for Pops once he's reported missing? His house. 12 proceeds to pull up on Haruko, Pops, and them while they're still trying to fit Pops back into his apartment, and destroying the apartment in the process. But before long, the cops are barging into the room and taking Pops back to the very lab that he just escaped from. Now, the Ministry of Public Welfare actually ends up letting the kids who stole Pops off the hook, since they don't want any negative press around their product, which hasn't even released to the public yet. But behind closed doors, Terada and Hasegawa are getting chewed out by their investors, who are now, rightfully so, starting to wonder if this technology is even safe. And while Terada, on one hand, seems genuinely concerned about the safety of the 𝙏𝙏 at this point, Hasegawa, on the other hand, is just sitting there with like this suspiciously calm smile on his face, despite everything that just went down. And so, yeah, keep an eye on Hasegawa, bro. Something fishy is definitely up with him. We cut back to Pops, who is currently right back where he started, cooped up in this lab with nothing to his name but the 𝙏𝙏 that's encapsulating his body. He's currently asleep right now, and we get a look at the dreams that Pops is having, and this dream appears to be a flashback to simpler times. We see Pops, who's about middle-aged, with a woman and a girl who are presumably his wife and daughter. Pops' wife has been deceased for a while now. We know that from the memorial that we saw in Pops' house at the beginning of the film. And his daughter is presumably the woman who sold him out to the government, so like, yeah, that's kinda not cool. But as the dream starts fading away, we get a look back at Pops in the present day, and as we're looking at Pops, we hear the man utter one singular word: the name Haru. Cut back to Haruko, and she's currently being demoted from a house nurse to a ward nurse thanks to her shenanigans from the night prior. I mean, at least she still gets to keep her job and not go to jail, but you know, at this point, said job consists primarily of picking up garbage and sweeping floors, and so, yeah, not the best of jobs. She's in the middle of cleaning up one of the ward bathrooms, probably smelling mad old head piss fumes, when she suddenly gets interrupted by a bunch of cheering echoing from inside the ward. Upon going to investigate these cheers, Haruko discovers a bunch of elders gathered around a PC, and when she asks the elders what they're doing, one of the elders, who we're gonna call 𝙏𝙧, is like, oh, we're over here hacking into American companies and finding evidence of tax fraud. You want to come join us? Now, 𝙏𝙧 here, he's a very interesting individual, and I don't necessarily mean that in an entirely positive way. But the thing about 𝙏𝙧 and his boys here is that they're absolutely wizards when it comes to hacking. And so upon hearing about their hacking mastery, Haruko goes up to 𝙏𝙧 and she's like, hey, I heard you're nice with the PC. I might need you to do me a favor. We cut to that night, and Haruko and 𝙏𝙧 are up late trying to find a way to remotely hack into the 𝙏𝙏 from the ward. But unlike hacking into the American companies, which can apparently be done in a single afternoon, you ever notice how Japan is always throwing mad jabs at the US in these anime? But unlike hacking into the American companies, hacking into the almighty 𝙏𝙏 is proving to be quite the challenge. With the help of a few of his hacker buddies, 𝙏𝙧 is able to finally gain access to the 𝙏𝙏, at least after a few hours of grinding. But once they have access to Pops and the 𝙏𝙏𝙏, careful not to confuse Unk and Pops by the way, but once they have access to Pops, Unk runs into an issue where they're unable to get a response from Pops no matter how many messages they try to send to him. While thinking of a way in which to get Pops to respond, Haruko goes into her locker to retrieve the picture of Pops' wife that they had picked up from his house. And somehow, through the power of fictional anime techno bullshit, Unk and his geriatric hacker friends are basically able to clone the deceased woman's voice and use that voice to speak to Pops in the messages that they send. How they're able to do all this with an old photograph and a bunch of console code is beyond me, bruh. You might have to go to 𝙏𝙖𝙡 to figure that one out, I'm not gonna lie to you. But when the slumbering old man suddenly starts to hear his wife talk to him, he wakes up on go mode like the Squidward meme, and he starts begging for the woman to help him, bemoaning how much pain the 𝙏𝙏𝙏 has him in as he does so. The next morning, Unk and the gang start to implement phase 2 of their plan, using their remote access to the 𝙏𝙏𝙏 to free Pops. They start off by busting Pops out of the hospital lab that he's in, much to the dismay of Terada, who is once again watching his initiative go up in flames. But after a few minutes of leaving the hospital lab and roaming around the streets, Pops comes across this arcade that seems to be playing a familiar song, a song that reminds him of his wife. As Pops busts through the arcade to steal the radio that's playing the song, Unk and them back at the ward are like, that wasn't supposed to happen, and yeah, come to find out, the AI within the 6th generation core that powers the 𝙏𝙏𝙏 has essentially evolved into being a sentient version of Pops' wife's consciousness. In other words, Pops' dead wife has, in a way, techno-possessed the 𝙏𝙏𝙏, and along with Pops, the two of them decide that they should go to the beach from Pops' memory one last time. It's a beach in a city called Kamakura. Now Haruko at this point is like, oh shit, that's not good, and she takes off to go try to stop Pops from rampaging through the city Akira style and causing even more destruction. As you could probably imagine, a giant robot man tearing through the city isn't exactly an everyday occurrence in 80s Japan, even in this highly technological, fictionalized version of the country. And so the moment word about Pops begins to spread through the public, news coverage and law enforcement are all over that, trying to get to the bottom of what exactly is going on with this mysterious old man and his giant bed that is essentially just an AI mech suit at this point. The feds, Terada and Hasegawa pull up at the hospital looking for Haruko, but they're unable to find her since she already took off on a moped so that she could catch up with Pops. Seeing as though both of their targets are on the move, Terada gets 12 to change course, and he directs damn near the entire police force to make a barricade in the direction that Pops is headed. Apparently, as Pops has been rolling through the city, he's been picking up and implementing various wayward pieces of tech into his build. And so by the time he's approaching the barricade, the 𝙏𝙏𝙏 is damn near twice as big as it was before, and it has all sorts of random shit just sticking out of the machine's chassis. The police begin their operation to stop the 𝙏𝙏𝙏, bringing out 2 bulldozers in an attempt to overpower the mech. Upon seeing the bulldozers come out, Haruko, who had just recently pulled up on her moped, once again tries to come to Pops' defense. But this time around, Terada is not about to let the girl slide, and so he orders the cops to seize her, which they proceed to do so rather violently. Luckily for Haruko, Pops' AI robot wife is actually watching this all go down, and she recognizes Haruko as the one girl that tried to help her husband when everyone else just wanted to exploit him. And so while Haruko is being arrested, the 𝙏𝙏𝙏 proceeds to scare the cops away, destroy one of the bulldozers, absorb the other bulldozer, and check to make sure that Haruko is okay before continuing with Pops on their journey to the beach in Kamakura. Now at this point, things are looking critical, right? Terada and Hasegawa hop into a helicopter to try to chase after the 𝙏𝙏𝙏, and Haruko isn't far behind them, hopping into the same helicopter right before it takes off. It's also at this point that Hasegawa reveals his true motive behind joining the project, and long story short, it turns out that Hasegawa is an undercover military operative who hijacked the 𝙏𝙏𝙏 project in order to test out his new experimental military weapon that runs on the 6th generation core. Before long, the helicopter catches up to the 𝙏𝙏𝙏, which is now taken to going Spider-Man mode and like swinging across the monorail track so that I can get to Kamakura quicker. Haruko notices a train car coming from the other end of the track, and she braces for the worst to happen, but right before the train crashes crashes into the body of the 𝙏𝙏01, the machine goes monkey mode and it like climbs on the train itself so that the lives of the train's passengers are spared. As the 𝙏𝙏01 continues to ride along the rail, Haruko, with her impulsive self, tries to jump out of the helicopter to stop the machine. And when Terada tries to stop her from, doing this dumb shit, the two of them end up tangled up with each other, and Terada ends up being the one that falls out of the helicopter in pursuit of the 𝙏𝙏01. Now Terada, he's for sure about to die right here, right? Like he's about to turn into a warm splatter of human guts and bone fragments on the ground. But luckily for Terada, the 𝙏𝙏01 decides to save him and take him along for the ride to Kamakura, while simultaneously lecturing him about how unethical this entire 𝙏𝙏01 project was in the first place. As Terada and the 𝙏𝙏01 are nearing the beach, the two end up striking a deal where in return for letting them see the beach, the AI will peacefully return back to the city. And so, as the 𝙏𝙏01 approaches a military barricade that Hasegawa set up to block the path to the beach, Terada gets off the machine and he's like, "Hey y'all, move this barricade out the way, we're letting this couple pass to see the beach." Now at this point, Hasegawa has already gone mask off, right? He's no longer worried about pretending to care for the elderly. And so instead of removing the barricade, he proceeds to deploy a combat model of the 𝙏𝙏01 that the military has been working on, so that he can test this machine's might against the AI experiment that's gone rogue. Now at first, the combat model is whooping the OG model's ass, right? Like it's just sleeker, stronger, and faster than the clusterfuck that's Pops' bed. But since Pops' 𝙏𝙏01 model is multiple times bigger, it's able to temporarily overpower the combat model and drive it into a cliff on the side of the road before continuing past the barricade and resuming its journey to the beach. Of course, having learned nothing about chasing around giant AI mech suits, Haruko chases after the 𝙏𝙏01 once again. And as Haruko goes off to endanger her life once more, Terada drops the boy Hasegawa with a totally deserved right hook to the jaw. And that's one thing I can respect about Terada, by the way. Sure, he spent the first half of this film being on the wrong side of history, so to speak. Like, sure, he was torturing old people and beating on young women and shit, and actually no, that shit sounds crazy now that I'm saying it out loud. Just forget I ever started praising Terada. Actually, like, yeah, no, let's just keep it pushing. To get to the beach, Pops and the 𝙏𝙏01 simply have to cross through this tunnel that leads from the city to the beach. But as they're attempting to cross the tunnel, the combat unit that Pops' mech had overpowered earlier lowers itself to the other end of the tunnel with a propeller before proceeding to smash into the OG 𝙏𝙏01 for round 2. Now as all this is going down, Haruko's friends are back at the hospital watching it all happen on the news and on the PCs that Unk and them had used to jailbreak the 𝙏𝙏01 in the first place. The redhead friend ends up calling the dude friend and tells him about Haruko's situation. These two are implied to be fornicating, by the way, just a little side note. But as the dude friend gets into an ambulance to save Haruko, the OG 𝙏𝙏01 finally lets Pops out of her chassis so that she can focus on beating this combat model. When Haruko's friend arrives, she, Terada, and Pops get into the ambulance and continue heading towards the beach. But when they reach the other end of the tunnel, they're cut off by Pops' 𝙏𝙏01, which has now absorbed the combat model and is currently blockading the road as this giant mass of tech and pipes and wires. Like, the shit looks absolutely crazy, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you right now. Pops' AI wife has now evolved into like this massive technological leviathan that's absorbing any loose piece of technology that comes within range of his tendrils, including the ambulance, by the way. And when Haruko sees that things are starting to get out of hand to this extent, she knows she has no choice but to destroy the machine's core and free the consciousness of Pops' wife once and for all. As Haruko is climbing up the mountain of hardware, Hasegawa is not far behind her, but unlike Haruko, Hasegawa wants to protect his invention at all costs, right? Like, for him, it's like innocent lives be damned. This 6th generation core is far too valuable to just let go to waste. Hasegawa tries chasing Haruko to the core, but the girl maneuvers a fair bit quicker than him, and so she reaches the core before he has the chance to catch up with her. The core is like this weird metallic bulbous looking machine that also has this clump of what looks like brain matter attached to it. It's really weird, but before Hasegawa can come and stop her, Haruko slams this tube of compressed air into the core, which surprisingly does nothing but knock her away from the core. The AI powering the machine, aka Pops' wife, aka 𝙏𝙖𝙡, then looks at this tube of compressed oxygen that was shoved into its core, and it decides to self-delete by igniting the tank so that the compressed air explodes. The giant pile of mechanical fuckery starts falling apart after the core explodes, and everyone watching from home is happy that this doomsday device in the making was stopped before it could get too strong. 𝙏𝙗, on the other hand, sees the robot's head fall to the ground, and so she goes to the shore to speak to 𝙏𝙗 one last time. When she sees 𝙏𝙗 approaching, the first thing that 𝙏𝙗 asks about is her husband, and sure enough, as this is happening, 𝙏𝙗 is walking Pops down to the beach so that he can keep up his end of the bargain. While they're sitting on the beach together, the wife AI tells her husband that she can't go on living at the moment since her hardware is cooked, but she tells him that she wants him to wait for her, and she promises that they'll be together again soon. After hearing this promise, Pops agrees that he will wait for her right before passing out, his consciousness drifting like the serene waves on the sunset-lit beach. In the aftermath of everything that just went down, Hasegawa is arrested thanks to evidence leaked by 𝙏𝙗 and them, and 𝙏𝙗 dedicates himself to building a version of the Project Z bed that is, less dystopian than the one that became sentient and damn near took over the city. 𝙏𝙗 and the gang go to visit Pops, who is currently being treated in the hospital, and as they go to visit him, Pops is muttering sentiments about going to the beach and wanting to go see his wife again. Now 𝙏𝙗 is thinking that Pops is low-key talking about dying, right, since that's the only practical way that Pops would be able to see his late wife again. But as she's trying to raise his spirits and convince him not to talk about such sad things, a giant explosion comes from the other side of the building, and come to find out, it's 𝙏𝙗, who had rebuilt herself as this giant 50-foot massive Buddha mech. When she said that she was coming back to bring Pops to the beach, she meant that she was literally coming back to bring Pops to the beach. And yeah, Pops is happy to see his wife again, and everyone else is terrified to the point where they start praying to what might potentially be their new robot overlord. And yeah, that's it. Roujin Z, ladies and gentlemen.